So in this video we're going to explore safe sleeping for your baby and reducing the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. It's really important that we talk about this even before your baby's arrived to help you understand the measures that significantly reduce the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, because they're all very simple, easy things to do. So the most important thing we advise is that your baby goes down to sleep on their back. So be that to sleep at night or to sleep during the day. The reason for this is this is being proven in research and evidence to be the safest sleep position for our babies. If we maybe talk to our parents or our grandparents, things were different, and they were perhaps encouraged that it was okay to put baby on their fronts or their sides. But the evidence into reducing the risk of sudden infant death syndrome has suggested that these are not safe sleep positions anymore, and that we must always put babies down on their back. Typically, until your baby's nearer 6 months of age, they don't have the ability to roll from their back to their front and their front to their back. So each time you put your baby down, put them on their back. As your baby is getting nearer 6 months, it might be that you go in and you notice your baby has turned from their back over to their front. So it may be that you just gently want to reposition your baby and put them on their back. But you're not going to stay up all night and watch your baby and make sure they stay on the back. If your baby can roll from their back to their front, they can roll from their front to their back. And then at that point, from 6 months older, the baby will just find their own natural sleep position. But for that first 6 months, always on their back when the baby's unsupervised. Many new parents worry about maybe if the baby's a bit sicky or spitty, is it not safer to maybe put them on the sides? Well, we advise that baby for that first 6 months sleeps in the same room as you. And this is for that exact reason, so that if baby was a bit spitty or sicky and they're on their back, they would make enough noise to alert the parent to come and attend to them. And many babies that are a little bit spitty or sicky will be able to naturally turn their heads to the side a little bit. So it's much safer for them to be on their back. Room temperature is really important too, and overheating in a newborn is thought to be one of the risks of sudden infant death syndrome. So room temperature needs to be about 16 to 20 degrees. So having a little room thermometer, you can invest in like a little cardboard thermometer for a couple of pounds, just to keep in the same room as your baby till you get used to kind of regulating temperature. If your house is colder and hard to keep warm, then just one extra layer on your baby of clothing or bedding. If your house is hot or it's in the summer months and it's much higher than 20 degrees, then obviously you would reduce the number of layers of clothing and blankets on your baby. Babies really don't need to be kept over hot, and typically one extra layer of clothing or blankets is all that they need on top of what you'd be comfy in as an adult. Whilst your baby's in hospital in that first 24 hours perhaps, the midwife might advise for your baby to have a hat on to help them regulate their own temperature. But by the time you're ready to take your baby home, your baby ought not to need to wear a hat indoors if the room temperature is 16 to 20 degrees. And wearing a hat indoors can increase the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. It's also really important to think about taking your baby out and about in winter months. So yes, by all means, when you're out and about and it's colder outside, having your baby a hat on does help them to maintain their heat. But remembering that when you come back into a warm house, or even wrapping your baby up to take out in the car, if you've got the heating on in the car and it's enough for you to take your hat and coat off because it's got warm, think about the same for baby as well. Baby's still got a hat and a snowsuit and really over wrapped in the back of a car that's getting too warm. So think about reducing the number of layers of clothing once your baby comes into that warm environment. Smoking, unfortunately, is a risk for sudden infant death syndrome, so it's really important that we address that, hopefully during pregnancy, and to seek some help for smoking cessation. If either parent is a smoker, it's still really important to keep the house smoke-free. And by being smoke-free, we mean that no smoking takes place in the house. This includes also stood on the back step with the door open, because likely a lot of those fumes are going back into the house. So it's really important to keep the house smoke-free. As well as our baby being on their back to sleep, it's important that our baby is positioned safely in the cot, in a feet to the foot of the cot position. If you take a look at the slide, you'll see two demonstrations of this. The left hand side, you can see that the baby has been positioned at the top of the cot, and this baby is then going to have lots of space between where its feet stop and the end of the cot. The covers need to be tucked in firmly at around shoulder height, and by tucking in firmly, you know that the baby can't pull those covers up and over themselves. Babies will decide whether they're a hands in or a hands out baby, okay? Most babies will sleep with their hands out. So again, just putting the covers at shoulder height, and to leave your baby's hands out is fine. Remember, they're going to be covered with a baby grow. And remember, baby's hands are always going to be cooler than the rest of the body. So never feel the baby's hands, think they're cold and add extra bed clothes. Always remember to feel them centrally. They should just feel warm to touch. They shouldn't feel clammy. In the right hand side, you can see that the baby is safely positioned, feet to the foot of the cot or the Moses basket. And so by positioning the covers at shoulder height, I know my baby physically can't get any further down under those covers, and they're in a safe sleeping position. It's also really important that the cot or the Moses basket is free of any items that can cause suffocation. So everybody loves to buy you lovely things for your baby, including perhaps lots of really beautiful stuffed toys. It's important not to have these in the cot or the Moses basket. Any toys that are kind of at the top above the baby have the potential for falling forward onto the baby and potentially causing suffocation or overheating. So a nice clear space in the cot or the Moses basket. If you're using a cot, we don't recommend the use of any pillows or duvets. We also don't recommend having cot bumpers on. Cot bumpers again can restrict the flow of free air, can cause overheating and can be a suffocation risk. So a nice clear cot or Moses basket. With regards to the number of layers of clothing and bedding, using sheets and blankets. Cellular blankets are what we use in the hospital, and you can see there that there's tiny air holes in these cellular blankets, which again are great for reducing the chance of overheating. Remember, if you were to fold something, that then counts as 2 layers. So be careful about folding blankets over too many times, because then you're maybe doubling, tripling, quadrupling the number of layers. You can look on the internet and find TOG values for number of layers of sheets and clothing, but typically for going down to sleep, a vest, a baby grow, and a single layer of sheet and a double layer of blanket. If it's particularly cold overnight, maybe an extra layer of blanket, and remember to just always feel your baby's temperature here. With regards to swaddling and use of sleeping bags, swaddling is a means of wrapping your baby that can help them feel more safe and secure, can really sort of emulate what they were feeling inside. The advice on swaddling keeps on changing, and in the times I've been a midwife, we've gone through periods of saying it's safe, it's not safe, it's safe, it's not safe. What I would direct you to is a website called BASIS, B-A-S-I-S, and the link for this will be on the screen. BASIS is a really good website full of the latest evidence-based research for safe sleeping for babies. The current advice for swaddling is that if you choose to swaddle, that this becomes your routine for baby from birth, that you choose to do it from birth each and every time your baby goes down for a sleep, either during the day or during the night. That you swaddle with nothing thicker than a sheet, so don't use a big blanket to swaddle. That you don't swaddle any higher than shoulder height, and you don't swaddle too tightly. The baby should still be able to kind of flex and bend their hips up, and you're not restricting their movement too much. Swaddling and bed sharing can cause an increased risk for sudden infant death syndrome. So if you are planning on bed sharing, perhaps not to swaddle, or to make sure that your baby's hands are definitely free. The reason for this is if you're bed sharing and your baby is very tightly swaddled with their hands inside there, that if a parent was coming too close towards the baby doesn't have their hands and they're free to kind of alert parents that they're becoming too close. If you choose to swaddle, then to do it from birth. Don't wait for sort of 1 to 2 months in and then start it as a new practice. So that's the advice on swaddling. Sleeping bags, we have quite limited research and evidence on these. If you choose to use a sleeping bag, then it's a vest, a baby grow and a sleeping bag, no additional bedding to be used, and you use the appropriate tog value for the time of year. So you'll get a winter weight or a very lightweight summer weight sleeping bag, or something for spring and autumn that's in the middle. Still put your baby in a feet to the foot of the cot position. You must ensure that the sleeping bag fits your baby well. And by fitting well, I mean that it's fitting here on your baby. If the sleeping bag is fitting too near to the shoulder, then it's too big for your baby, and there's a danger that they could get their arms down into that sleeping bag. So make sure that it's fitting your baby safely here and it's not fitting too far on the shoulder. Sleeping bags perhaps work well with bed sharing, so your baby has got their own covers. You can still use sheets and blankets with bed sharing, but remember to tuck them in at the sides and also to tuck them in at the bottom, so your baby has a fixed point that they can't move any further down under the covers. And we're going to explore bed sharing in another video.